So what we're going to do now is a couple of oil paintings. I love using oil paint. It's so unctuous, it's got the feel to it. I love putting it on thick, and I think it's one of the best mediums. So what we're going to do today is a beach scene. I'm not sure where it is, it's around the coast here somewhere. And we're starting off by doing the background. We don't need to do much drawing for this because it's a simple scene. We're going to paint the background she oaks behind the hill here. And we're using a quick drying medium. So I tend to mix my paints on the palette. The palette is a sheet of glass, which is an old poster from an op shop, which I took out and turned over. And it's on a trolley, which you move around all over the studio. So we're going to mix up some ultra blue, some deep red, some raw sienna, and it'll give us a nice dark colour. Oops, been a bit messy here. That's all right. Coming down here, you can see the shape of the image up there. Always use as big a brush as possible. Same colours. Once you've covered that area, all your fear of a white canvas is gone. If you've got a fear of a white canvas. I never had the fears of these things because I used to be a sign writer. So I've been handling a brush all my life. What I've got here is a little wooden block with 2 nails in it. So I like to paint the edge of my paintings as I paint the painting, so they dry at the same time. And I don't know if you can notice or not, but the painting is sitting on a couple of chopsticks, which keeps the bottom edge off the edge of the easel. Paint the edges at the same time. Put the block of wood in there. It'll just sit on those 2 nails. Pull that down tight and it stays there. So this is our she oaks in the background. So now I'm going to put some extra colour into it. I've got some raw sienna, I've got some turquoise here. I like turquoise, I'll just put it in. And you can see how thick the paint is. It's gorgeous stuff. Bit of burnt sienna and raw sienna. A bit more turquoise. Now with oil paint, it's the opposite to watercolour. You paint from darks to light. Watercolour, you go from light to dark. Now what I'm going to do now is just put some shapes in here to make it look like she oaks, just with some ultra blue and some purple and a bit of cerulean blue, all on the brush at the same time. They mix on that brush, and when I put it on there, it just gives it the colour I want. It's the old story, it's impressions we're after. Some of my paintings take a long time to dry because they're so thick, but that's the way I like doing it. Bit of purple up there. It's like all trees, if you go to the shape of the tree, you'll get the impression of the tree. I just look at that now and use my intuition to put more colour where I want to, and I want to put some dark up there. So I'll put a bit of purple up there. Purple there. And once you've done it, just leave it be. You really need to go back and look at it, but I'll take my glasses off, I'll be able to see what it's like. And that's fine. Now I'll leave that brush sitting there with that paint in it and get another one for the foreground. Now the foreground is sand. Sand is mixed by using raw sienna, white and purple. So I'll put that over a bit further. Put my medium down there. White, raw sienna, which I've run out of already. Always leave the paints you're using on the palette if you have a palette that's big, because you don't have to go searching for them again. I always use quality artist paint, biggest tubes I can get, because I use a lot of paint. That's the purple, the raw sienna, and white. This area up in here is in shadow, so I'll put a bit of burnt sienna in there, a bit of cerulean blue, and a bit of purple. A bit more purple and a bit more burnt sienna. And I don't know whether you can see that or not, but you see by mixing the colours on your brush, all these colours in here just stay there. And your eye will mix those colours for you. You don't have to spend ages mixing up colours on your palette. Well, if you don't want to, that is. If you want to do that, well, you do it. I'm going to get the hair out of there. New brush. Well, that's all right. We come down here. A bit more blue in there. Purple. And as we come down here, we've got this dark colour here as well, still coming in here. So all those colours mixed up as we said before. A bit more blue required there, it's a bit too brown. And we'll just paint all this over here, scrub this in. Scrub all this in. This is the darker tone. We talked about tone before. This is the darker tone before we put our lights on top of it. Because with oil paint, like I said, we go from dark to light. Now, that might appear to look too dark for a beach sand colour, but won't be because we're going to put the lights on top of it. And we'll just do the edges now. Once we stand up for a sec. Bit of the dark colour up in here. That gives your painting a new dimension if you go around the edge, because when you walk into a room, you see the painting, it keeps your interest around. So now what we're going to do is do the light part of the sand dune. So we've got straight white here, just a touch of raw sienna in there. And that paint is straight out of the tube, very thick. We come down this little valley here. Yeah, mate, never use a new brush when you're demonstrating. Now, if that's a bit lighter there, but I can just use that white straight on top of that, and that will mix with that paint underneath. It won't be light, but it'll give you a nice colour. A little bit of a highlight up here. Then I want to go over this side and put a bit in. You see, by using those blues in the foreground here, it's tied into the top. The whole painting's tied together. I fancy a bit of red in the corner here just to bring it forward. Just a little bit of red with a bit of blue in it. And that'll just bring that forward a bit. As we talked about before, a bit of burnt sienna here. And we've got this shadow colour coming up here, so we're going to use burnt sienna and cobalt blue, just for this little. Another one here. Make that a bit darker in here, I feel. And now I want to put the little bits of twigs and things, so I'll get a smaller brush. I use filbert brushes. Always use, or most of the time use filbert brushes. Filbert have got this round mushroom shape on them. So you can use them flat, but then you can use a point. If you want to use the point to do anything, you can just put the point there and it does fine lines as well. So I find the filbert brush very handy. Now I'm going to put some of this grasses in. One up here. Very soft touch. Burnt sienna and cobalt blue. I don't want to put anything down there. I want to keep that like that. You can change any reference you've got. You change it to suit you. I've got one coming down here. I don't know what that is, but we'll put it there. We've got a few bits and pieces on it. It's cerulean blue and raw sienna mixed together there, just to give it some leaves on that. Whatever it is, coming down there. They need to be darker, these things, so they can show out. Just tendrils of grasses and whatever's on the sandhill. Further away they go from you, of course, the smaller they get. There's some along here. And we'll put this along here before we put the grass in. We'll just use a bit of burnt sienna, raw sienna, and cerulean blue. Now we'll get a bit of turquoise blue, raw sienna, put that in there, mixed on the brush. And now we put the little bits of grass in. Because I use a quick dry medium, well, it won't be dry, but I'll put these grasses in, which are going to be cerulean blue and a bit of white. And I'm doing that with what they call a rigger. That will pick up some of the paint that's already there. There's a lot of it back here. We start at the bottom, go to the top, because your brush will get thinner if you go up. So I'm just continuing across the canvas here, do these little grasses. These are a bit intermingled, some of these grasses. They go over on top of each other, so you can bring them up and around. You can... If you use a light touch, you can paint on top of the very wet paint. Because don't forget, we're after impressions. Okay, so we've done that, that and that. We're just going to put a bit more colour amongst that. The base of those grasses, which is going to be the cerulean blue and raw sienna and a bit of turquoise. Put it on nice and thick. Now what I do, I look at this and I just think it needs a bit of this grass coming down here. This is just burnt sienna, straight burnt sienna. But it mixes with the paint that's on there, so it doesn't get bright. And I just think it needs a bit of that background colour, which is the purple and the blues, in here somewhere. Bigger brush required. See, it mixes on the canvas. And that's just about it. I just want to put a bit of pure white up here, so it really jumps out at you. One thing about oil paint, you can't be worried about how long it's going to take to dry. Just want a bit of lighter colour in here. I don't want it too dark and sombre in there. I'll just put a bit of lighter colour down there. It doesn't matter if your brush just skims the surface, because there are other beautiful colours showing through. And that'll do me. I'll just go back and have a look at it and check that everything's in its right place. And that, to me, gives the impression of that sandhill over at Fraser or wherever it was. And that's the finished painting besides the signature. Now, talking of signatures, which we didn't mention before, I'm not a big one for these flashy signatures. I think the painting's more important than the signature. So I just put my surname in there, usually when it's dry, and most of the time on the right-hand side at the bottom. Sometimes you can put it on the left if you need to balance the painting, because it can be used to balance the painting. But that one's finished now, so we just let that dry, and it gives the atmosphere I was after.